Hello there. As I speak to you on Zoom, I'm actually also in St Peter's Church. Clever thing, isn't it, this space and time lark? I'm going to ask you now to go backwards in time and imagine yourself as part of this story that we've heard of today in our Gospel reading. Just imagine. Huge crowds of people, all well fed, for free. What an amazing experience to be part of. Battery Point here in Portishead, a mere 8 years ago. Huge crowds of people, all well fed for free. What an amazing experience that was to be part of. Many of you will remember the big lunch for the Diamond Jubilee. All sorts of food, including jerk chicken and over 4,000 cakes, given away as a sign of God's generous love. There have been lots of other enactments of this popular miracle story. In 2017, 90 churches in Hull gave away 5,000 fish rolls, and also tiny little knitted fish as well. And linked to our Facebook word for this week, in Trafalgar Square several years ago, 5,000 people were given a free curry lunch, cooked from food that was rejected by supermarkets, like wonky carrots, to highlight the global scandal of food waste. The miracle story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 is well known, much loved and still very relevant today. I wonder when you first heard it, how it made you feel, and how your grasp of it has changed through the years. We tend to be a bit wary of miracles these days, don't we? Scientists look for patterns in the natural world. They experiment to test them out, and when confident in them, accept them as laws. So when things don't fit those patterns, it can seem threatening, especially if they're breaking well-established laws. Though, to be honest, I believe that the true scientist is less threatened by such things and more excited at the prospect of increasing our understanding. The Jewish culture of Jesus' time saw things rather differently. The Jews saw that their world functioned in its ordinary fashion because God willed it to do so. And therefore, if God occasionally willed it otherwise, that wasn't a threat, that was a sign or a wonder or a miracle, something to be thankful for. As Christians today, there's a sense in which we have a foot in both camps, valuing science, but also aware that God is God and will always be beyond our understanding. After all, Jesus' resurrection doesn't exactly fit with our current laws of science. Miracle stories in the Gospel play an important part. There are 32 different miracle stories, and they're just not bolt-on optional extras. The feeding of the 5,000 is the only one that appears in all 4 of the Gospel stories, so it's obviously really important. And there are all sorts of interpretations of it. Some believe that it literally happened exactly as described in the Bible. Others believe that it's a retelling of a meal that Jesus held for many of his followers with pieces of bread, like a sort of foretaste of communion and of the heavenly banquet. And when you look at it, the parallels between this miracle and the Last Supper are striking. Some rationalise the miracle into a lesson in unselfishness. As the small amount of food was shared, so others were inspired or maybe shamed into sharing their food too. And others see this particular miracle as a picture of the whole gospel, rather than just one specific event, with God through Jesus meeting our needs. In reality, many of us hold to several of these different interpretations. So where does all that lead us? Well, I'd like to focus on just 3 aspects of this amazing miracle this morning. Firstly, Jesus says to his disciples, "You give them something to eat." You give them something to eat. God provides, but the resources are human. And that same charge is directed to you and me today, both physically and spiritually. God says to us all, you give them something to eat. The news this week, both in this country and across the world, concerns food. The expansion of the free meals programme in this country and the work of the Disasters Emergency Committee globally, seeking to feed the poor and to help them to tackle COVID-19 too. As the disciples were called to act, so too are we, physically and spiritually. Food bank and make a lunch are just two practical ways that we are continuing to respond, sharing God's loving provision. Let's keep up this good work and make sure that we are just as active in feeding people spiritually. Secondly, I'm guessing that the disciples felt overwhelmed. So many people. We refer to 5,000, but that was just the men. There were women and children there too, so maybe it ought to be the feeding of the 10,000, or in reality probably 20,000. The disciples had only meagre rations and very little money. Whatever could they do that would make any real difference? They were in a serious mess. Generally, as humans, we tend to be quite good at getting ourselves into serious messes, don't we? But all miracles start with a mess, with a problem that can't be solved. It seems it's only when we're out of options, when we can't handle things, only then that we really turn to God. Only then that we find that our mess can be a start of a miracle. So let's not be scared of our messes, but remember that a mess is just the first stage of a miracle. And thirdly, the disciples were focused on what they could not do, rather than what Jesus could do. Jesus tells us that without me, you can do nothing. Justin Miller puts it this way: when we take what we have and we give it to Jesus, our not enough becomes more than enough. Just look at the abundance of food that was left over at the end of the miracle. When we feel daunted by the task that we're given, when we feel ill-equipped, unprepared, maybe it's because we're not meant to be doing it alone. God is with us. Our God is a God of miracles. Our God calls us to action. He says to us, you give them something to eat. We're called to give what little we have, to have faith in him, to trust him, and to be ready for the surprises that follow. Just imagine it. Crowds and crowds of people, all fed well for free. What an amazing experience to be part of. And you and I, we are part of it. Praise God.